So first of all, thank you so much for accepting my request for this interview, Scott. As I explained to you other day that what I'm trying to do is to collect the stories of different people and their journey from what they wanted to become when they was in high school. And from their first job to now, there are mostly either different people, mentors, or situation that directed their path to this stage. And then later talk about their goal setting and time management method and a message to audience, right? In this case, I know you for a long time. I've been working with you almost 5 years now. And I believe you've been in AdventHealth for about 18 years or so?
Yeah, I've been actually 39 years this year.
39 years.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I was completely off. I want to start from what you wanted to become when you was in high school.
You know, that's a good question. In high school, at least when I was growing up, the social setting I was in was not as focused on goal planning at that age as they are now. That was really more college level. But that's not to say we weren't without some ideas. I think some of the more immature ideas, I know I really love dirt bikes, and I was thinking of having opening a workshop and living above it and focus on dirt bikes and street bikes and work as a mechanic. Also considered being a scuba diver instructor and running tours. Later on, as I matured a bit, I actually strongly considered being an emergency room physician, but I set that aside for some very specific reasons, chose not to go that route. So that's some example of the types of things that I might have considered as I was in high school. Of course, it changed once I got to college.
And Scott, before you started working as a programmer in Florida Hospital MIS, what other thing that you have done?
Well, my first job was working for my father. He was a concrete contractor. And that first job, interestingly, it's worth mentioning, it actually gave me the best training for the job I have now. I would credit it as providing me it made me better equipped for my job than any of the formal training I received. Now, clearly the formal training gave me the skill sets necessary, but there's really a set of things, some core lessons learned there. One was, first of all, that no job is too hard. Secondly, that no job is beneath you. Any job needing to be done is worth doing by yourself or others. Also, a real can-do attitude, meaning find a way to get the job done. I remember a lot of job sites we'd come on to where the task was difficult, the conditions were terrible, but I never once heard from that crew, we can't do it or don't know how to do it. Well, they might say they don't know how to do it, but there was never any question about doing the job. We always found a way to do it and found a way to do it safely. So this determination in the face of adversity to find a way to get things done was learned there. We also learned that many hands make light work. It's construction, right? Not working by yourself is a good thing, but not just working as a team, but working safely as a team was very important. And that has translated also into the work I'm doing now. Of course, it's different. It's not physical labor, but the same thing applies. And then lastly, I think the most intriguing thing I learned was that any task that you can eliminate is 100% improvement. So oftentimes a job or a task is a larger task made up of smaller tasks. And we can at times try to optimize or improve the steps we take, but sometimes rethinking the job and eliminating tasks entirely is the best way to get a non-incremental improvement. So those are things that I learned on that first job. My formal education, when I started that in college, computers were just starting to be a thing.
Right.
I guess I'm almost as old as dirt, right? PCs weren't an item. It was mostly mid-range and mainframes. But I did observe, I had two brothers. One was an accountant, ended up being a hospital administrator. Had another that was in IT, was actually a programmer, worked on large mainframes. And I saw that they needed each other, and they didn't talk well to each other. The domain knowledge wasn't rich at that point. And so I resolved to fill that gap. It was a need that I perceived would be in the market. And I thought if I had both of those skills, that would be useful. I learned toward the end of my career, my education at college, that there really was no spot in the middle. at that time, it was either one or the other. You're either in the financial world or accounting, or you're in IT. And so the decision I made at the end of college, my degree was actually in accounting. I had nearly a minor in computer science. Of course, it's not like computer science these days, but I had some training there. I passed my CPA exam. I got an offer from Arthur Young and Company to go to Omaha and work. And then I got a call from a friend of mine, or actually a former computer instructor, my computer training at the college. The instructor had moved to Florida to work for Florida Hospital. And he called me up and asked me if I'd be interested in the job. And I'd learned by that time I really didn't like accounting all that much. And I also recognized that I had a knack for software development. And so I accepted him and I came down to Florida Hospital in 1983 to start working here. Now at that point, those were early days, right? It was mostly mid-range and mainframes, a small crew. I think the team was maybe 40 or 50 people that ran the mainframe for the hospital. There were no PCs. And then a friend of mine named Jim Becker and I were assigned to bring in the first IBM PCs into the organization. So we were a team, if you can call two a team. We were the initial team of two that brought those devices in, and shortly thereafter started bringing in different local area network topologies to connect these devices. It was an intriguing time. There wasn't a lot of software available, so we actually had to write, other than word processing, we ended up writing whatever it is that people needed to have done. The work was primarily focused at the C-suites. That's where the money for these very expensive machines was focused. And so I got to build some nice relationships in the C-suites, and we would turn about 18 applications a year, I guess. Not that they're big, but they were useful. And so that team grew over time, but that was an interesting time to bring that on. And then in the 1980s, later in the 80s, they determined that the systems they were running on the mainframe that ran the hospital needed to be replaced. And there weren't a lot of options in the industry at that time. They considered a couple products, but decided to go their own way. They decided to start a software company called Sunbelt Systems Concepts and to write software with even the potential maybe of selling that at some point, but primarily to write it for the use of Florida Hospital. And so I joined that organization. Now they gave us a mainframe, a COBOL compiler, and a relational database called DB2. And at the time, we were taking a lot of heat. Nobody believed that a relational database could be used for a transactional system, right? You wouldn't base, you'd use it for ad hoc reporting and that kind of things, but they didn't think it would be used for actually a system. But we did use it. And so we built up from scratch architecture and because of my financial experience, I was asked to help lead out the team that wrote the financial suite, so general ledger, accounts payable, inventory, those kinds of systems. But I also found myself gravitating toward accelerating development, creating code generator and other rapid application development frameworks in COBOL on the mainframe. That was based on some work I'd done on a side job prior to that. And it ended up being productive. It accelerated our delivery, such to the place that within 5 or 6 years, we had developed about 40 applications. And when I say applications, it's things like pharmacy, revenue billing, inventory, case management, pharmacy, rather major systems. So a team of, there might have been 40, 50 individuals stood those.
All under AHSS, right? All under AHS and Sunbelt?
That's a Sunbelt Systems Concepts, that's correct. Yep, and those systems then were installed starting in 90 all the way to 95. And then those systems continue to run. They last about 25 years. We just sunset the last of what we called the SunCare applications just in the last few years. And then after that, transitioned, or actually as that was in the late 90s, we were looking to maybe renew the SunCare applications and looking for alternatives to COBOL and the mainframe. And so I did some exploratory work and I brought Java to the organization in the late 90s. We're using it a lot now, but that was the first use of it then. And we used it to extend the capabilities. We brought graphical user interfaces and image capabilities to the Sun Care suite. And then downstream from that, I also created a full-on application development framework along with some others. Todd Parker was involved in that. Chris Stroud helped out. Coin Tibbetts. And
Brian Green as well, right? At that time.
Brian Green was our manager at that time. And so we created that framework. It was used for quite a few projects. In fact, it's still in use now, although we're in the process of sunsetting it. And it was going to primarily be around extending Sun Care, but now that that's sunset, that's sunset as well. So that's kind of where I got to now. Obviously working on the projects we're working on now for patient access.
I remember meeting with Brian Green many years ago, and he was very proudly demoing that system for us. I don't know what the background was, but I remember talking with him, and he was demoing us what system it is.
Yeah, so that was a development tool called Radiant. I think that was probably what you knew it. It later got renamed, but it was a very rapid platform. You could turn around applications super fast, actually, on Android and iOS. So, not and desktop.
And then we merged. I was saying, then we merged AdventHealth, Adventist Health System, HSSIS, and then Florida MIS. And at that point, we all came under Digital Group.
That's correct. In fact, that's a reuniting of a previous division. So Sunbelt Systems concept used to be combined, and then about 96 or so, the Florida Hospital, those that supported Florida Hospital became part of Florida Hospital IT, and HSIS were the remaining employees that were out of the Sunbelt organizations.
I did not know that. Okay, now I know. So Sunbelt become HSIS and Florida Hospital MIS.
Sunbelt Systems concept combined them. To some measures, right? I mean, there were still some separate operations internally, but they were all together until they were separated again in the mid-90s. So it's good to have them back together again. Really happy with what Brent has done all along the way. Very supportive of what he's doing. Very happy to see the reunification. I think this one's going to stick.
Yep. And I want to jump into this topic where you have chosen different roles for us and move from one role to another. So I wanted to learn the thought process behind when you opted to become a manager, and then you decided not to be a manager, and then you did the exact same thing with the director position. You became a director, and then you stepped down as an architect. So what's the thought process, your thought process behind those decisions?
Yeah, good question. So you explained 2 times where I stepped in what may be considered a leadership role. Those had happened in the past as well, back through the 90s. In each time, same result. I would step back away from the leadership position, and it's really 2 axes that spins up on. One is I find great enjoyment and fulfillment on the engineering side, actually making the machine go. And so, if you think about a seal swimming in the ocean and finding a harbor they like to swim in, that's my harbor. And not that I mind leading, but it's not something I would do long term. I think you can do it for a period of time. I think there's others better at it. I tried to be helpful at the times I took those roles on, but tried to step away. Another example was we had the Joint Technology Committee. I think it might still be running, but it was known as that in the 90s, when we had the 2 separate organizations that were separate again, we still wanted to have some shared conversation about shared technology and approaches. And so we formed a committee, and Brent asked me to lead that for a time, and I did for a couple of years, but gladly had that transition back to some managers that really had the operating line of authority. So that's one access. That's one answer to your question. The other answer is related, but a little more specific, and that is, I prefer to have jobs that aren't as frontline with individuals. Those lock you to a time and a place, right? Okay. So as a manager, you have to be at a time and a place with certain people, and not that that's bad, but I like the independence of being able to shift time and place.
I see.
And it was for that same reason why it goes all the way back to my college decision not to go into medicine. That's very restricted in time and place. Right. So I for my family reasons, really, and I didn't have a family at that time, but looking forward, and clearly once I had a family, I wanted to spend some more time. And so I was in the 90s, one of the first that worked at home for many years. It was great to be there while my daughter was growing up, and being able to be a little more mobile. In fact, it's all played out again. The reason you're seeing me now sitting in what looks like an RV is because this is an RV. After COVID, we're not back in the office, and so I'm currently traveling about 6 or 7 months out of the year, but working full time.
Yeah, and you
couldn't do that.
Sorry,
it would just be hard to do that if you were locked in time and place.
Yeah, and you took care of your parents too in these times.
Yeah, that's correct. In fact, 2 times. This time for COVID, my mother broke her knee, and so I spent 6 weeks up there providing 24-hour care. And in 2018, my father had a stroke, and I took a leave of absence, unpaid leave for I think 6 months.
I think that was the time when you stepped down as the director.
That's correct. That was exactly the time when I stepped down as director. It made sense to do it that way. And that's when Jason now does a good job, picked up and carried that forward.
Yep. So there are many people who want to become a manager or a director. And I'm sure when these situation and opportunity was there, you probably have thought about it, you probably have some preparation about it. So what's your tips for somebody who want to become a manager and currently at the programming stage, or a senior person but not manager?
2 things come to mind. I imagine there's a whole list we could go through, but let's mention a couple. One is you have to care for people. That's clearly a people position. If you don't care for people, that's not a place to be. And I think the job of that position is to do just that. So I think that's important. The other thing that's important is communication. I think if you do care for people, you need to also be able to communicate. You got to set vision and articulate, be very clear on laying out the objectives of the organization to your team in support of those initiatives. And that communication is really probably, in my estimation or my experience, more listening than speaking. It's not about, you need to be able to communicate thoughts and ideas, tell the story that's in your head to others. That's important to get them to buy in and be a part of a team. But listening both above and beneath, that is critical. So those skills will get you a lot of mileage.
And how do you make other people believe, like the people who are selecting you as a manager, that you can do the job? And that's, I think, that's where people kind of stuck to approach kind of fear of rejection or fear of being not ready.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. That fear can stifle a person a lot. It's very important at any level that a person be confident in your abilities and willing to take on tasks that you're uncertain of. Some of the best rides in or out of the workplace are chasing things that you haven't done or better yet, those you don't even think can be done. Those are interesting journeys to take. There can be some fear around that. So a person does need to get past that. But that's what we bring to it. You also asked about what, you didn't say it exactly the way, but how do you get recognized? How do you get people to select you to do the job?
Yeah.
I don't know that I have good answers for you because I have deliberately tried to not do that. In fact, I actually stopped some of my advanced postgraduate studies because I felt it put a target on me to take in those roles that I didn't want to possess. And so, but I think doing it, helping people, doing an honest job, staying alert, communicating well, caring about your job, caring about people around you gets noticed. And so in that regard, I think it does put you on a list of people to be considered to help lead a team. Of course, competence helps, but then that's a given, right? That's kind of a baseline. I'll give you an example of that. So why would I hire somebody to build me a house? Well, I don't go out and look for the first person that knows how to drive nails and cut wood. Those are the skills, and you must have those. Right? So you need to be competent. But that's not why you hire somebody to do that job. You hire somebody to do the job because you like their style, you like the way you're treated, you like the confidence that they instill as they're doing the project, their statusing and reporting they can give you. It's all those intangibles that become very real and necessary is why you'll hire anybody to do anything for you. And so those are the skills. I think you got to propose that you deliver those things that you would want if you were buying that service. Treat people nice.
That's the perfect
and
answer.
Do your job.
Yeah.
Now, that being said, it's great. Those managerial roles, a director in particular, it's one of the toughest positions in the organization. And it's a wonderful role, very rewarding, but also very demanding because it's the first place at which you've got the missionary, the missional objectives coming down from the organization for you to execute on, and a budget then to execute, right? That's really that first layer where that happens, if counting from the bottom up, right? So you're kind of pressed between the demands of what needs to take place and the constraints you have in delivering that, which is very invigorating, but also very, very taxing. And so it can be a pressure cooker at times. So you need to be ready for that.
Yep. Scott, before we continue, I want to apply a blur on our background. There is a light on your head. I think that may be, so I wonder if we do a blur or not. It's fine. I think you took care of it. Thank you. Cool. So one more question around this. When you were becoming director over engineering, what was your thought process? What are the things that you had in your mind that by becoming the director, you will do this? Or because you always go with the mindset that you're going to contribute, you're going to serve, you're going to add some value. So I wanted to ask that question. When you applied for that job, for director position, what was your thought process on what you wanted to contribute, or why you wanted that job, I guess?
So first, let me clarify one thing. I actually didn't want the job, and it's nothing against the job. For reasons I've talked about, I think that's not my. I actually turned down the job 3 times, and when I was asked to take it, and so I was happy to take it. I think so. That's number one. You did though ask, and now having done that, or you could say pursuing that role, what is it that you would do? I felt I needed to sharpen up in the areas of caring for people and making it safe for them to participate, so that people can bring out their best and not. I don't have a long track record of being a manager. I do care for people, but it's something to be learned, and so I did seek out advice. We talked about listening, and for me, it was a lot about listening talking to people who've been in the role, talking to people that have been above that role and what their expectations are of that role. And of course, talk to those which I was a peer among, right? Having to report into that position. So I think treating people as they deserve was important. I think speaking with these individuals that I mentioned, or those roles that I mentioned, helped me to gain a better appreciation for the specific tasks that need to be in play and some of the approaches to be successful in that role. So mentoring, in a word. AdventHealth was very good in supporting that. David Oakley got me into a cohort for directors, and that was super helpful. Again, as really mentoring. And as part of that, they asked that we find a mentor, and that was super valuable for me. In my case, I got a hold of, I wanted somebody that was maybe in the business, had been in the business, but got out and kind of had longer view of, more reflective, if you will, as opposed to currently in the position. So I reached out to Marty and Blair, who was the past president of Florida Hospital and AdventHealth. We had a relationship that was built back in the early days when we were writing those first PCs, and did a lot of projects for them, and other projects outside of work as well. So he was gracious enough to let me come and spend some sessions with him, and that went a long way for my understanding of how to best fill that role.
Awesome. We'll come back to mentoring and coaching. But I wanted to share, during this time when you became the director, I got an opportunity to work with you as a manager there. And I always remember the time when we had our one-on-one, or whenever I came to you with some either a challenge, problem, or a decision that to be made, right? Those are the different situation. And I always remember that your first question, you listen, right? Whatever I share, that this is the challenge and this is what's happening, and this is whether it is a people related challenge, or a situation related challenge, or a project related, deadline related, whatever it is, you listen everything, and then you always ask a question. So what do you think? What are the options here? And I would say the one option, and you will encourage me to come up with 3 options. So I would go back and work on 3 options, and then you would listen to those 3 options and say, so which one would you recommend? Which one you would choose? And I would say, I would probably gonna go with second option, and this and this and that. And then you say, then go for it. And I would go. So within a month or 2, whenever these type of challenge arrive, whenever the situation occur, I know that if I go to you without this thought process, you would anyway gonna ask. So I have to think ahead, brainstorm, and then come to you with 3 options and a selected option. And you would let me choose whatever I recommend. What happened over time that I made this as a practice, and then it became very easier for me to come up with the 3 options and then choose something, because you let me do that. And then also it kind of helped building the courage and trust that this will be okay. One other thing that happened with 3 options is I get very tempted or emotional with one option, but when you come with 3 options, step back. I get very emotional with one option, one solution, because then you will think about Yes, it is good option, but it is not a perfect option. It has these two problems. And you start thinking about how I can compensate those two problems to make it a better option. But when you come up with three options, you don't have to worry about this one option being a perfect option. You think about all three and then you emotionally detach. At least that's what happened in my case. I emotionally detached with an option and I was able to put more logic and uh, the decision making become easier for me. So I wanted to share that this is a huge impact um, made on my life when I was working with you on deciding the day-to-day thing or some of the major thing. So first of all, thank you so much for introducing that concept to me and sharing how it has impacted me, how it has helped me grow under your leadership.
Well, I'm glad to hear you found it was helpful. It has been shared with many times, and we do think we get good mileage out of it. I can give you a little history of how that came to be if you're interested.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to ask. So that's impact and my understanding, but I wanted to ask you how you came up with this option, how you conceptualize so that whoever listening to this can learn directly from you and then also adopt in their life.
Well, first of all, I'm glad to hear that what you described, your experience fits right in line with what the intended result was. Where this came from actually goes all the way back to the early days of the development when I was doing automation. So it wasn't just tools that I was providing, but also process. Mm-hmm. And so what I'm about to describe is developed over a period of years. Kind of, necessity is a good mother invention, right? So it really is two primary things that take place here. One is decision making. Many times I was finding myself and others, and you can probably relate to this, where you have a task to do and you jump in because we're anxious to get it going and we do the project, and then we wake up figuratively wake up some period in the future and say, oh, well, this didn't turn out exactly the way I thought, or I wish I'd have known now or known then what I know now, right? And you might have a little rework that gets involved. This is natural and can happen. Okay. Well, it dawned on me that the difference, so what happened from the moment when you started the work and the time that you determined that you knew more? Well, some of it's experience, having tried it, but another part is just thinking about the problem a little longer, right?
Right.
And so I use what I called time compression. I didn't want to wait weeks or months to figure out that I didn't know something. I wanted to compress that time. So time compression was about being very direct and thoughtful and debating the topic from all angles to determine what all can I know about this. And triangulation is probably a good word for this. We use triangulation in the physical sense for, one dimension doesn't cut it for a lot of things we need to accomplish, right? So this rule of three, as I came to call it, was simply this. If you have a task to do and you haven't yet found three ways to do it, you don't have one you can trust because you don't have anything to compare it to. And furthermore, you haven't thought about it long enough. There's at least three ways to do anything. And if you haven't found them, that means you haven't thought about it long enough. If you haven't thought about it long enough, it's likely you're going to do something, you're going to misstep somewhere along the path, only to wake up and say, oh, I wish I'd have known it sooner, right? So that's one dimension of rule of three. I think on that dimension, it's worth stating that the more that the decision or the task to be done is critical or subject to change, meaning it might be in a hostile environment, not hostile in terms of people, but kind of could be challenged, the more options you need. I call it, so time compression is one. The other term I have kind of fed into this is slow down to speed up. You need to consider your steps. When people say I don't have time to do something, it could be said that what they're really saying is they don't have time to do it twice, right? I mean, if you don't have time to do it, clearly you don't have time to do it twice. And so what you're saying is, if I don't have time to do something, I need to make sure that every step I take of the time that I can spend is taking me forward. And if we rush ahead without vetting out our options well, we run the risk of doing exactly that, taking backward steps in a time when you really can't afford it. So even in the moments when you think you can least afford it, you must do this. And we found great benefit. I'll give you one example. I was loaned out to help a sub-organization who was writing some software for one of our related organizations. And it was a regulatory change that had to be applied to some software, some enhancements. And the kind of enhancement, if you don't do it, you close your doors because you can't bill, right? So kind of important. And the team that was assigned to do it was running behind. The project was severely in the ditch. There were some weeks, I think it might have been in the 6 or 8 week range, maybe 2 months, over 2 months, I thought, perhaps. Anyway, so we were asked to come in. So I came in, I brought Todd Parker with me, and I knew rule of 3 worked. And so we didn't just dump it on them. What we did is we came in on a Tuesday or Wednesday, and we said, time out, you got to stop working for a minute, which really irritated them because they knew they were in a ditch and we're hustling, working hard. And I said, can you get us up to speed? Get us the domain knowledge, tell us where we're at. And so it took 3 days, and they were not happy, and we weren't happy having to stop them. But we get to Friday, and they had a solution. They said, yeah, this would be a good plan. And then I gave them the good news, which they didn't think was good news, and that is they needed 2 more options. And they would have liked to kick us out of the room. It was tense. So you could cut the tension with a knife, literally. And we didn't know if so Todd and I go back to our hotel. We didn't know if they were going to let us in Monday or if we got in, or whether they were going to be there. Right. It was not good. But fortunately, when you look at your 2nd, 3rd, 4th, or 18th option, as we've done in some of our projects, you already have the pieces in your head, and now you just have to arrange them or take some out or add some new pieces, right? You're not starting over. Right. So by Tuesday of the following week, we had our 3rd option. It was critical enough. We probably should have done 2 more iterations, but 3 was enough. I found that 2 never works well enough. 3 is a minimum. So they picked one, and I can't remember. It wasn't the first one. I don't remember if it was 2 or 3 that they picked. Fast forward to the end of the project. We came in ahead of the deadline. Everybody was happy, smiles on the faces. As part of an exit process, Todd and I brought them back in the same room where we started this process. Okay. And I asked him a question. I said, what if we had proceeded on that Friday, come in Monday and do the option that we had in your head on Friday? And it was amazing. Their faces got long. They're looking at each other. Oh my goodness, we would still be working and we may not hit it. And so part of this, back to the things I learned working for my father in construction, eliminating tasks is 100% improvement in there. And so as you're iterating through your options, when you find that the solution starts to simplify, you're on the right path. Now, there is no best. We use that word, but there's no best. Every option that you pick has shine and shadow, right? There's compromise. You can't ever get a solution in life that's without any consequences. Right. So the balance is, or the effort here is to try to find the best balance between shine and shadow. Emphasize, bring out the shine and try to minimize the shadow to the best you can. And that's how you guide your rule of 3. So that's axis number 1. The second element of the rule of 3 is a human dynamic, which I think is probably more important than the first. The first one's a tactical thing, and it has great value because you can use it individually. But the second aspect here is a team dynamic, and that is you want people on the team to be providing their best all the time. All right? And there's many personalities on a team. And so those personalities could range from someone who is very outspoken and dominates a conversation, and and add to that, maybe I'm just making somebody up here, right? One end of the spectrum, they're very outspoken and very defensive. Kind of, you mentioned, like, you get emotional about their option, right? And so they can run a team over. the other end of the spectrum, you might have somebody that's well considered but shy and doesn't want to talk. And somewhere in the middle, you might have somebody that says, I have an idea, but I don't want to share it because it's not perfect, it's not best, or people might not make fun of me, or I haven't thought through it completely. And so this all gets in the way of progress. You don't get a good product, and you certainly don't get it fast if that's happening. And so the rule of three is the process side of this is geared exactly at that problem. What we say is, you come to the table like you did to me with 3 options. And then we do it as a team, 3 options. Mm-hmm. But when the person brings it to the team, they'll say, well, here's option 1, 2, and 3, and I think 2 is best. And well, here's why I don't like number 1. And here's they're describing the shine and shadow of each of those options.
Yeah.
And then you coach them forward to say, well, and then they should say, well, and what's option 4? What's wrong with the one I like? Not as a challenge, but a recognition that none of them are right. In fact, we've already saw that none of them are best ever, right? So we're just picking one. And so the person in the middle that I spoke of that says they don't want to share because they haven't thought it through entirely, they don't need to. They can just share because it's not the solution.
Yep. Right.
What this is based on, it's the idea that ideas feed on ideas. We know this to be true, right? And so some of the options we've done in brainstorming sessions doing the rule of 3 as a team, once somebody's brought their task to the plate, is sometimes crazy ideas, just nuts, but it triggers something in the next mind, right? And so you get this genetic diversity of minds coming into the problem space where we're no longer debating personalities or trying to defend positions. We're openly debating the issue. And so it makes things go very fast. It lets everybody share. For the person that's overrunning the group, you have an opportunity when they say, well, what's better, right? Well, how can we, what's the next option? What's number 7? What's number 8? It gives people an opportunity to join in. And those who are shy, they don't have, they can learn that they don't have to be, so hesitant. So it's about, yes, it's a tactical technique to help you. I've used it everywhere in my life now. The way I buy socks. I mean, I literally sometimes buy 3 things, same product, 3 different types, just to compare. It's a sickness that I have, perhaps, could be considered that. But very useful, very fun, and in a group setting, it's a great dynamic to empower people to bring their best and bring it early and often. So that's rule of 3.
Yep, and I did experience a situation where some people, like you said, were shy and some other were not, and then the people who are not shy take over typically the conversation. I want to go back to the mentor and coaching. So without taking name, we have many new managers, and I know how much, and should I say, I'm lucky enough to have both mentor and coaches within AdventHealth who have been very helpful. Barrett Hand, I don't know if you know him, but Barrett Hand.
Yeah, I know him very well. Good.
Yep. Sure. He has been mentoring me for a long time. I think that's the first thing that I did when I became manager. The next day or the same day, I went to him and I asked, I just got promotion, and I want to request if you will become my mentor. And I admire him for a long time, and he said yes, and we started that journey since then. And Nikki Trotter from the HR team, she coached me when I was not sure what's the next thing that I wanted to do. And many other people who have helped through this journey. So what I wanted to ask your perspective on, let's say, new managers that we have, or somebody who want to become manager, how they can find a mentor and what benefit that they could get from that mentorship and coaching.
Yeah, for me, it's what you did. What you described is exactly how you find your mentor. You find somebody you respect. It's doing, if I want to go out and learn how to hit a baseball, I'm not going to go to somebody that doesn't play the sport. So obviously you're going to be somebody in this, but then you want to, there's a big variety of skill sets, right? And so the heroes that we have in sports or other venues, you want to emulate. And so you'll be attracted to certain attributes of individuals, and that's where I think you begin. I think it would be, for me, a little scary to say I'm looking for a coach. It's like a yellow pages, right? And here's one on a list, I pick it and go, or I get an advice. Because there's also some chemistry that has to happen with your mentor, but they're around. If you pay attention, you might want different mentors for different aspects. Now, Barrett Hand, great choice. I'm really happy for you. You got to hook up with him. So I think it's about observe behavior. If somebody's doing something that you respect, and you've seen them deal with situations and handle it in ways that you admire, those are who you go after, which is why I went after, in my case, Marty and Blair. It's so I think you need to have some familiarity, be alert, be looking, be listening, right? Absorbing. And so that's my 2 cents. That's how I went after my mentor, and it sounds like you did as well.
Scott, I just wanted to give you a quick heads up that at around 4:25, 4:30, I will have to leave to pick up my daughter.
Okay.
But I'm guessing our conversation would go longer. So maybe we can do a follow-up. But my next question is around goal setting and time management. How you do that for your personal or in general, right? Your professional as well as personal.
Professional, my goal setting is focused around looking for problems to solve. It started with a mentor I had by the name of Bob Rido back in the 80s. I was a young guy struggling on a new tech stack, and so it was new. And when he saw me struggling, he'd say, "Oh, what are you doing?" And I'd tell him, "Oh, cool. Can I help?" And when I told him I had a problem, he thought that was nice, and he says, "Can I help?" And I really admired that. How, so for my money, I thought if you could help people solve problems, people like that, and there's probably they would probably want to keep you around, and you get to solve interesting issues. And so goal setting for me is identifying problems that need to be solved, and in addition to that, things that I find interesting and challenging, especially things that seem hard to reach. So I think my goals have been really around being service to others. That really solidified for me. So I'm passionate about it. And the reason I'm passionate about it is, or one of the reasons that my passion increases, back in 1989, I was diagnosed with Hodgkin's disease. So that's an interesting thing. Now you know your form of death, and you know the timeline that it's running on. Well, that's a humbling experience. And you realize that the world doesn't, you're going to be gone. The world doesn't need you. Obviously, that happens to all of us. So maybe this realization I should have had anyway, because we're all on this path, regardless of whether, now I'm clueless like everybody else. I don't know what I'm dying from, but I still am. But it was interesting because it have that in a very intense way, to realize that your service can end, and that's okay. But I thought, wouldn't it be nice if you could do something where your service continues to help? I really was passionate about the organization, still am, wanted to help. That's why I'm here, wanted to serve. And so I found myself gravitating into goals that would allow me to do things that would leverage not only my time, but other people's time. So that's why for probably the last 15 years, half of my career anyway, the later half, been focused around the process of software development, tooling to drive that faster, processes, rule of 3 being one among others, that would improve the human interactions around that, so that we can get. And why is this important? Here's something that dawned on me that helped with goal setting, I think, in terms of how you pick your goals and how you execute on them. We have to not be too much in love with the job we do. I'm not saying don't enjoy your job. I love my job, and I love the people I work with. But we have to have an honest realization, a humility to understand that we are also part of the problem. If you come to me to do something, if it took me 2 years to get the job done, is that helping you? No.
No.
I'll give you an example. You want to buy a car. You kind of want to have it soon enough to go buy some groceries, right? Right? So now I could be the manufacturer of cars, and let's say I didn't have a way to get them to you quickly. And I'm a good car manufacturer, but it's going to take me 6 months. I'm part of a problem. You with me?
Yep.
So we are part of the problem to the extent that we can't get the execution completed in a timely enough basis.
Okay.
So all I'm suggesting is the longer it takes to do a task,
Right.
the more you're part of the solution for sure, but you're also part of the problem that you're trying to solve. And so we have to get out of the way of ourselves. What that means is, how can I eliminate tasks to get 100% improvement?
Mm-hmm.
How can I automate where I can? How can I change a process so I'm thinking faster, quicker, getting people to contribute, anything to accelerate? So that's what I mean by not loving your job too much. You need to get out of the way.
Yeah.
We're there to serve.
I see what you mean. Yeah.
We're there to serve and get out of the way. Get people connected with the thing they desire, play our role in that. But once they're connected, we go on to the next job.
Right.
And so one discipline that I do personally, and it's kind of sounds like the converse of goal setting, but it does help. And that is, I actively try to forget everything I've ever done.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I don't try to forget how to do things, but I try to forget what I did. So for instance, I may know how to build a home or a barn or a car. And so those techniques I retain, but I don't remember the house I built or the barn I built or the car I built. That's too much to carry. And so not only is it too much to carry, I don't want to get, we always talk about thinking outside of the box.
Mm-hmm.
Well, who built the box? We built the box. So don't build the box. And the way I try to do that in my feeble way is to say, I don't want to come into a problem that you give me a task to do, and I try to get out of the way by getting it done, and say, well,
Mm-hmm.
The problem you gave me looks green, and the last green problem I had, I solved this way. Well, that's a box, right? I just defined almost the definition of a box.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but now imagine this: if I don't remember how I did a green thing, now I know how to build colorful things, but if I don't remember how I built the green thing, I won't be tempted to repeat what I did last time. And so I actively do try to forget everything that I have done. I've actually had people come to me asking advice on software. I said, well, yeah, come to me, I'll help them. Then I said, well, why'd you come to me? And they said, well, you wrote it. And I said, no. And they said, yes. And my name was all over the comments in the code. And I don't remember having ever written it. That's happened multiple times. Most recently with Pavan just a couple of years ago in a small segment of work that was done. And so I think it's important. So for me, that's a form of goal setting, in that the goal is the pursuit of the next thing to do, the problem to solve, being helpful to people, but doing it in a fresh way each time. Each time you go after it, forget about what you did before. In fact, better yet, just don't ever. And if you don't have to forget it if you never remembered it, right? You don't have to forget it again every project. You just do away with that. And so forgetting has been super helpful for me as a technique to not only you're not carrying baggage with you, you move faster,
right?
But you can attack new problems at a ready pace. So it's been super helpful for me.
That's a great concept. I wasn't aware of this thought process, this philosophy of yours, but I like it.
Now there's some shadow to that. I sometimes forget things I have to remember. And now maybe it's because of age, but it's been going on for a long time. It's actually a discipline that
as long as we all not forgetting our wife name, we are okay.
Still good there. Still good. 40 years next month.
Oh, wow. Congratulations.
Thank you.
We are running 22.
Excellent.
22 years.
That's a nice round number. Congratulations, sir.
Thank you. Have you ever thought about having your own business or having your own something?
Yeah.
I know you did some part-time things, but not like business.
Yeah, I've actually started 2 corporations, software development related.
Okay.
One was in the 80s, which actually led to my ability to do some of the automation I did for the sun care suite of software in the 90s. So, and I also started a company. There was an idea I had, which is a whole nother conversation. The short story is, we talk about eliminating tasks. And for software development, if you count them, I counted, depending how you count it, there's 6 to 9 steps you kind of go through to build software. And based on what I learned from my dad's crew, if I could eliminate a step, wouldn't that be great? Well, I found that eliminating a step can't be done. Those steps are necessary. And yet I wanted to deliver, to do that. And so the person who gives us our breath gave me an idea. And the idea was this. He said, you wanting to eliminate steps in software development? And I said, yes. He said, then you can't because they're fatal. Yes. Well, they said, if they're fatal, is it any more fatal to remove all the steps? What if you could use software before you write it?
Okay. Well,
that's absurd, I thought. And yet the question that was presented to me stuck with me for 6 months, and I couldn't shake it. Out of that came up a methodology and a theory that you can in fact do that in some way. And software is interesting because it's not constrained like physics. You don't have gravity and tensile strength and real things we have to deal with. Man made the rules. We can bend them a little bit, right? And so we actually sold the idea internally at the hospital. It was of some interest, but in my estimation and their estimation, it was probably a 25% chance of a return on investment, which is not good, right? And so they opted to not pursue it. Okay. But I started a company with a friend of mine, Scott Morrell, and said, this sounds like an interesting problem because number one, it's actually literally impossible. But if we chase it, we'll probably get some interesting artifacts. And so we started a company called Ceronics, and we chased that. And in 3 years' time, we actually had a working prototype that says, yes, you could use software before you write it. And that's a whole story as we get into. And out of that came Radiant, which is a scaled back version of that we saw many of the benefits of rapid development there, but not to the extent that we had originally. In fact, that's something I probably still want to go chase again. So yes, but both of those companies were never started for funding, much like the jobs that I take. I'm not working because they pay, although I need pay. I mean, we need that, but that's nothing I've ever pursued. I started those companies as a working lab. The idea being, I could do some things that I wasn't able to do in my employed job, right? But you got to set it up in a structure to start. You don't know if it works unless somebody will give you money for it, right? That's kind of the test. You're doing something for somebody, adding some value. Right. And so I did that. And then once they became somewhat operational, at least the first one became operational, I lost interest in it because it locked me in time and place, and people come to you for support. And so we got rid of the customers, encouraged them to go elsewhere over a period of years, and shut that company down. And then same with the second one. For other reasons, we've determined, mostly personal reasons, we've determined not to continue to invest our time in chasing what was Radiant. It was really a rocket sled of a ride. That's a great tool. We just don't have the time to pursue it. So I don't know if that's helpful.
Yeah.
Answer your question.
My last question for today is, what's your message to the audience? Audience being the people who are in their early or late career and trying to see what their future looks like, next 5-10 years looks like.
So you're talking about career growth, kind of a path if they were to chase?
Yeah.
Well, I think we mentioned one already, and that is caring about people. We can think too much about our job sometimes, but job's always about people. That's where the value is. And so you got to keep those first and foremost, no matter what your trade is. Secondarily, obviously, the obvious one is acquire skills, but I would say acquire a variety of skills. Some of the most proficient and prolific contributors I've seen actually have crossed up skills, from arts to multiple technical streams, or something complete, arts and sciences kind of blended up. So variety of skills, I think it challenges the mind in interesting ways, and they benefit each other. Again, ideas feed on ideas. And then once you have those, you got to believe in yourself and your abilities. There's going to be plenty of reasons to doubt yourself, given by your own mind or other people's minds about your position. And so you have to be confident. And if you're not, there are people that can help you find that, again, through mentorship. But I think the big thing, once those are in place, that's kind of the plateau, or kind of the assumed bits. I think it's so important to learn how to communicate. Everything we do, you have to sell. Now, I'm not talking sales, but if you're leading a team or working on a team and you got an idea, aren't you selling that idea? Right. In a sense, you are, right? You have to communicate that. And so you need to know how to communicate well. And there's three aspects in my mind to that. One is you need to listen well to others. If you can't listen well, you're not communicating well, right? And it is true what people say, that's the majority of the communication is right there. Everybody has wisdom to share, and you want to gather as much of that as you can possibly absorb. And you only get that through listening. And that will help you, it'll help them. Your career will expand because of that. Second part of communication, I think, is you need to be able to explain your thoughts clearly so that other people can act on them and be part of, if either you're buying into their idea or that they're selling, or you're selling one to them. But if yours is a role to sell and you have that moment, you must be a good communicator. So taking even formal training, but some ways to verbally and pictorially and in writing things out, you need to do that. And the third aspect of listening, I would say listening to yourself. What I mean by listening to yourself is you must put into words the thing that you want to do, and that's for your own benefit, right? So what I've found, it seems too obvious, I should have learned this a long time ago, but over the years it's been true for me that if you can't describe in words what you want to do to some level of specificity, you'll never get it done. You can't do it if you can't describe it.
Right.
And so be good at describing it to yourself and listen to yourself. And that builds back to the second goal, and that is communicating that to others, right? So, so I think the communication is learn how to describe that which is necessary effectively for yourself first and to others. And then lastly, I think read, and read broadly. Really, I think it's about training your mind to search and absorb, right? It's kind of a mission to go in pursuit, and you're absorbing information. And so, and that's just not your own field of study. Broadly, again, these ideas feed on each other, and we're stronger by a hybrid of skills that are brought together. So broad reading. And then the last, I think, rule of three works also in career development. There's options. I mean, that's a sickness I possess, right? And it's been helpful in that way. So consider your options. There's more than you ever thought there are. And that, I had a case with Chris Strout one time. We were both believers in rule of three. We've seen it work way too many times to believe otherwise. And we were at option number 2, and there was still some shadow we didn't like. And after about a week, or maybe it's 2 weeks, Chris came to me, he said, there isn't a third option. And we don't like the shadow, but and I said, well, yeah, but just on the principle of the thing, let's go back and talk to, I think we chose to go back and speak with Todd Parker. He was on our team. And he said, well, we've already spoken to Todd. I said, yeah, I know we have, but let's go back one more time. We found number 3, and the shadow went away.
Oh, wow.
And so it's not about the intelligence of any one individual. It was that team. We'd already had the conversation. But by going at it again, the genius there is the ideas feeding ideas. We came in with a different set of ideas. We discussed the expansion of those ideas. And 3, we found 3, and I've never found it less than 3 working. It just doesn't work. I sent Chris off on one that was very critical and very subject to change. Rebecca Quinn, who was terrific on our team, she came in, hired her as a non-technical person on a technical project, and it was the best decision we ever did. That blending of skills was tremendous. And so they went away and came back with 18 options, or evaluated 18 options as part of them coming back. And it didn't take them that long, but it was a serious effort. And through it, really, that was a discussion of all the variables that were in play. And so the more complex the situation, the more variables there are, and obviously more solutions you can come up with. But yeah, 3 is, I've had several times and you don't think you can come up with 3, you end up with 6. It's amazing if you apply yourself. And I've never found a time, and to those that I speak with that have applied this in their lives, I haven't heard of them saying that they have ever found a time when the payback isn't there in your time savings. Any time you spend working on your options is saved over the course of the project. I have not seen it fail. So slow down to speed up. Absolutely. Compress time. Learn today what you can't learn, through experience. You still need experience, but this helps. This does compress time.
Scott, thank you so much for your time today.
It's been a joy talking to you.
Fun conversation.
Well, I enjoyed it as well. It's fun to talk about issues that are of interest to us.
Yeah.
I appreciate the opportunity to do that with you. Have a good evening.
You too, Scott.